Snoop, and Taylor Swift.
I tried to give a black man some credit during Black History Month, but
it's not Black History Month.
It is always Black History Month. First and foremost,
it's Women's Month. Look at you trying to you trying to steal it.
You know what? You caught me. I was trying to silence women, and you caught me. I apologize.
But Snoop and Taylor Swift, one of the most unlikely combos on planet Earth, we're basically aligned in saying that like the streaming idea doesn't make sense for
and why?
Welcome back, everybody. This is Soundbites, a part of the Album World podcast where we're looking at the music, the culture, and the internet to see how three of those things intertwine to create the music culture that we have today. My name is Demar Grant, a.k.a. King Grant, a.k.a. DeMuddy, and I'm here with my esteemed co-host, co-creator, Adriel Smiley, a.k.a. AdrielSmiley.com, a.k.a. Adriel Smiley Official, a.k.a. The Godfather, a.k.a. Mr. Smiley. Adriel, we are here to talk about James Blake, Kanye West, streaming, not streaming. Tell us about James Blake. Well, let me explain a little bit. James Blake on the Twitterverse, formerly known as the Twitterverse. Now it's on the Xverse.
Ew.
Has basically been on, I don't want to say a rampage, but he definitely released a diatribe talking about the idea of streaming being a negative for the people who actually make the music, right? And the fact that people who are consumers of music have been tricked, bamboozled, brainwashed into thinking that music is free, and the fact that the streamers barely pay the artists any money overall. There is an idea that something has to give. Somebody has to start paying for music, paying for the physicals. We pay for physicals in this house.
Yes.
Pay for physicals in this house. Or there's going to be a reckoning when it comes to the artist side or label side. So James Blake is upset.
I'm going to actually read his tweet. Before I do that, he's not the first person to bring this up. I think the most popular person to mention this a lot has been Snoop. That's
not even true. It's Taylor Swift. Remember, Taylor Swift didn't even want to put her music on streaming.
Oh, that's true. She had that whole fight. That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. What has she said since then?
You know what's so crazy? Taylor Swift was right. She was right in this sense. Like the idea that she was right though.
No, she was, but she also didn't do anything. Like
I agree.
Like
I agree. But for years she didn't put. I think it was like for multiple years she didn't have her music on streaming. She was like, "This is a bad deal. Like this doesn't make any sense. Like you don't even get any money off of it." Blah blah blah. She was right. Everybody else ignored her, and now everybody is like, "Oh, things are broken." Blah blah blah. It's like, well, people were Snoop, and Taylor Swift.
I tried to give a black man some credit during Black History Month, but
it's not Black History Month.
It is always Black History Month. First and foremost,
it's Women's Month. Look at you trying to steal it.
You know what? You caught me. I was trying to silence women, and you caught me. I apologize.
But Snoop and Taylor Swift, one of the most unlikely combos on planet Earth, we're basically aligned in saying that like the streaming idea doesn't make sense for
and why I brought up Snoop, I think Taylor fits into that is because James Blake is a very niche artist. Like there are many people who don't know who James Blake is. And so his perspective is almost a unique one in a sense where someone like Taylor is going to be able to eat regardless. And that's why you see the Era Tour became what the Era Tour became for that reason. She's in the position that if she were to make a move in this way, which I think she did by her re-recordings, I think that was kind of a part of it, that will actually hold some weight in this conversation. But this is what James Blake tweeted. He said, "If we want quality music, somebody is going to have to pay for it. Streaming services don't pay properly. Labels want a bigger cut than ever and just sit and wait for you to go viral. TikTok doesn't pay properly and touring is getting prohibitively expensive for most artists." I think he has something there. Snoop has long said we got to figure something out because this is not adding up. I think what's really interesting is that Joey Badass had this quote about his last album because we were calling it a flop, and he broke down how streams work, how CD sales worked, and said, "Is this a flop?" And his basic point was, this environment is set up for everyone to be a flop. and so the label can offer you horrible deals.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, 90,000 in the streaming era.
That's a ton.
Is a ton. But 90,000, you're still being compared to the CD era when you could have 90,000 and be fifth.
Yeah.
For that week. And so when all the contracts are still kind of set to that old era, it's like, okay, everyone, you're not doing well enough to ask for this much, or you're not doing well enough to ask for this much. And that's a cycle we're creating as well. If people don't know this already, the labels have stock in the streaming services.
Yes, they do.
That is just, the same way that Universal leaving TikTok was a huge deal. There are some labels that are still in TikTok, and TikTok is seen as like the next streaming service. And so the labels are kind of like shuffling around money to their friends and making sure it gets back to them. And who's not their friends is the artist.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the big problem here. I'm going to read one more tweet. And this is from Chet Porter, who, I don't know who this is, but he replied to James's tweet saying, "Some of the biggest artists I know can't even tour in certain places you guys ask them to come to because it's simply too expensive and not feasible. Imagine what it's like for smaller artists that have barely any income from music to begin with."
Facts.
Yeah.
That's a hard
Tough
fact.
Here.
It's a hard fact, and I think that James Blake is definitely, I think that overall, people who are music fans kind of already knew about this.
Yeah.
But I think since the pandemic, it became really stark. Like, who can tour, how long they can tour for, who is actually making money off their streams, because during the pandemic, the wealth transfer that happened between haves and have-nots, people who owned shit and did not own shit, was immense, right? And that was not different in the music industry. In fact, it was more so in the music industry. So you get to a point where people like, for example, who's a good example of this? Like Rina Sawayama or something like that, or Mitski, like to be really strategic with the place that they're ever going to tour, because there's a cost benefit analysis that has to happen, right? Like it costs a certain amount of money to set up, like go to a show, fly to the place, have your dancers be there, right? Have whatever stage setup that you have. Like if you're Travis Scott, there's a whole fucking stage setup that you have to pay for.
Yeah.
Right? At every place that you go to, you have to ship that shit too. And then you got to pay for all the people, your manager, your security. Then you got to pay for people to set it. Like, it's a lot of money that goes into one show. And you're like, okay, is it going to sell out? No. Okay, we're not going to do it.
And I'm glad you mentioned that. That's what I think it is where if you're an artist that is going to sell out basically every city you go to, like a Travis Scott, like a Beyonce, like a Taylor Swift, like, I used to work in stage setup, and once you're going to sell out, you feel more comfortable.
Yeah.
Okay, we can do this. This is fine. But you're right. Not every artist is selling out. And I think that's a big thing that we saw once the pandemic hit was, okay, you can't go outside at all. So there was opportunities we were trying to take and do different things. But a lot of artists were living check to check. And I think that, we don't assume that because maybe it's a $50,000 check.
Yes, exactly.
But that's something that we saw in a lot of different sectors. Because I know in basketball, it was the same where I think it was 60% of players are leaving check to check, which seems
crazy. Because I'm like, didn't you just sign a $100 million contract? How are you living check to check?
I think that was something that we saw during the pandemic was if you're an artist, where does that next check come? And sometimes, okay, I'll just do a walkthrough, or we have a show coming up, it'll be fine. No show coming up, no walkthrough,
no money.
So I do think this has to change. Let's talk about solutions quickly before we move on to the next topic.
Okay.
Do you think there are any solutions? Because here's my understanding. I grew up in the CD era, okay? And I think the CD era was just a different way of listening to music in general. You had to choose your album. If you got $20 that week, maybe you can get it 2 for $20.
A dream.
Depending on where store you're going to. But listening to those two artists, that's just how it goes. It's like, okay, this week I got the Beanie Siegel and the Jay-Z, and I'm listening into that. Okay, whatever Usher did, I have no idea unless I hear it on the radio. And that was what music was like. When James had his thing about saying people think music is free, I think that's what he means of, it's been almost a decade now of us just having music at our fingertips where it's normal. I think my little brother who's 19, talking about the CD era, like he can understand it logistically, but it's almost like I'm speaking about a real different time, because it is now. There's no way you can incentivize someone to be like, you know, a new album comes out, I gotta choose, I can listen to one or the other.
Yeah,
nobody wants.
That's fucking crazy.
You know, so I think that is the biggest thing where I don't know what the solution is, and as well, I think this is very similar to the writer's strike that happened in film a couple years ago. The power with the labels, there's no incentive for them to, you know, change the splits. Yeah, They ain't doing it for love.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that one of, you know, I think Joe Budden talked about this forever ago, right? Where he said the U word and everybody was like, "Oh my god!"
Yes,
he's like, "I don't under." This is Joe Budden saying this. I think it's probably right message, wrong messenger.
Yeah,
where he was like, "I don't understand why musicians don't unionize." Right? And people are like, "Oh, how would that work? How would that happen? There's too many people." And I'm like, TV, the Writers Guild has a union. The actors have a union. You know, there's there's millions of people that want to be an actor every fucking year.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing with musicians, like, you know, and I think that there is like because of how. How do I say this properly? I think because of how precarious the music industry is, that people kind of don't want to risk certain things, and they don't want to be like, "Oh, we should." Good
way to put it.
Yeah, they don't want to risk their spot, right? Like whatever their spot is.
Yes.
They don't want to risk their spot for any sort of collectivist action, and they don't want to like anger somebody, and you know, all of a sudden, your connect is broken. Right, so there's that for the music industry overall, and I think that James Blake is getting at this. One thing that's really important is like the genie is kind of out of the bottle when it comes to music consumption. It's impossible to beat free, like it's impossible.
Yeah, you can't.
Right, like, you know, the difference with movies was like you could have like rented any movie for like $5. But you had to leave your house to rent it for $5, and you also had to spend that $5. Like you weren't getting $5 to the whole blockbusters.
No,
it was $5.
You gotta choose.
Yeah,
and maybe the dollar bin by the register.
Yeah, you're choosing the one thing for $5 right now. Unless you don't have a subscription to Spotify, like if you don't have the subscription, you're just like listening to the free. At me on Twitter or Instagram or TikTok.
I want to know who you are.
I want to know who you are. If you are actively listening to the streamers without a subscription, please leave a comment on this video. We need to hear from you. But you're paying like $15 and you have literally millions, if not billions, of music to listen to for $15. And people, it's like, how do you break the spell on that for your average consumer? Because that's, for a consumer, you're living the dream. That's the best deal that you can get, right? So you're trying to, as a musician, you're fighting two battles at the same time. You're fighting the battle against the people that like love your music, right? And trying to like, okay, like, you like send me money so I can continue to make.
Can you send me money? Is hilarious, but actually,
but then you're also fighting the label because the deal is fucked, and you're negotiating. It's one against the machine, right? And there's no, you don't have a machine, right? So that's a double-edged sword.
I think what you said about upwards mobility is the biggest thing in terms of the U word, and people not wanting to do that, because to me that is really the answer. I think that we've seen it's not foolproof. Of course, there's been strikes and you know, from any side, but I think that ultimately is the answer. So I don't know. I feel odd that it is, and you know, I think it's in two ways. I think people at the top, we always say, "Oh, if Drake was independent, that would change the game forever," you know. And I think Drake knows that, you know, if he's independent, he can pay for his video himself. Yeah, you know, you know what I mean. Like, I think there are perks that someone gets from being at the top, where okay, I kind of have even more autonomy to just do things, and the label will make sure it's handled, kind of thing. And everyone wants to get to that level, but do the top artists lose that by joining? So I think that's a big part of it as well. Yeah, Drake is not gonna want to become part of a union, because like he's like, why would I need a union? I'm a billionaire. Yeah. I'm a billionaire. I'm signed on a label where he's also signed with the label, and the contract is not public. Nobody knows what his
deal is like. When you sign with a union, everybody in your usually
Yes.
there's a union contract. People know what you're signed for, how much it's signed for.
That's a good point.
And a bunch of everybody can see it. You know, people can see your contract, right? With Drake, it's just like, I'm dubiously signed.
Yes.
Nobody knows for how much, for how long. I'm just out here making somehow $1 billion. Nobody even knows how he's making $1 billion.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there's even that, right? So I think that when you're at the pinnacle, which very few artists are at the pinnacle, the people that you see on TV, that's the pinnacle.
Yes.
Any person that you're seeing on TV that makes music, they're at the pinnacle, right? Everybody else, you know, that's doing shows at your local club, right? Or is doing shows, you know, at your local club or like just like local amphitheater or whatever. People that have like 1 million or even like 100,000 monthly listeners, those are like that's your working class musician.
They may stop to clock in.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
For real though.
You know, 100%.
Or they just sell a shit ton of merch and they somehow like zeroed in on like their perfect consumer base, like a Men I Trust.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
That's Men I Trust.
Love Men I Trust.
Right? So I think that the vast majority of the people who are making music and exist in music are not, I just want people to understand they are not at the pinnacle.
Yeah, I think there are some people who have tapped into it. And I think ultimately this is the actual model, is like directing people to your site. Like, I know Rock Marciano used to do that. I'm not sure if 38 Special still does, but getting people to like buy their album from their website.
Yeah.
I know Blackstar did that with their last album. And it seems like Kanye trying to do something similar.
Yes. So tell us about Kanye, his solution, or apparent solution.
Yeah, so I'm going to read a bit of his DMs because I think this is a good jumping off point, because Kanye is the type of artist who we want to see do this and see it be a big change. Now, you know, kind of a prologue to this, he tried something similar with Donda 2 on the, what do they call the little machine that
it was like the mini player that he had.
The mini player. Yeah. And, you know, you bought the mini player and it came with the album. Now, you know, I did get the leak legally, of course. Yeah. Allegedly. And, you know, that didn't take off, I would say. But he's here for a stab at it with Vultures 2. Now, was talking with the team about how to release the next album. Shout out to Kanye's team. Like James Blake said, streaming devalues our music. We sell albums on Yeezy.com. I got 20 million Instagram followers. When 5% of my followers buy an album, that's 1 million albums sold. Great math by Kanye. That's 300K more than the biggest album last year. That's a fact. We sold 1 million items on Yeezy.com on Super Bowl Sunday, so we know it's possible. How do you feel about this? I
think Kanye West is probably one of the best people to attempt this, right? He has a diehard fan base, but it's also massive. Yeah. Cult of personality type dude. He's a cult of personality. Let's just leave it at that.
Yes.
And I think that he's probably him, and like, I don't know if Drake could do something like this, but Taylor Swift definitely could have done something like this, where I'm just gonna release the album and it's only gonna be either in a physical or a digital form, and you gotta buy it. Whether or not it's going to work is always going to be the question mark, because again, I said this earlier, I'm like, it's hard to beat free. It's hard to beat $15 for everything, right? Or alleged everything, because it's not really everything, because there's tons of mixtapes that you cannot get on stream.
But mostly everything.
But mostly everything for $15. You want me to give you $15 for your one thing? What? So that's the thing that he's gonna have to battle with. Whether or not he can actually get that 5% of his following to actually grip an album. Again, to follow somebody, it's free to follow somebody. It's easy to follow somebody, you know what I mean? So I want to see whether or not it works. It also helps if the album is good and Kanye West is not in the best space musically.
I would say that I don't think that matters, because his last album, we did not give it a good score, and it's #1 right now. And
But here's the thing. When you buy something, you want it to be good quality, right? With anything in your life.
Fair.
Right? So if it actually is good, you are going to be more likely to purchase it. Just regardless, you know. Everybody wants to buy a good product.
Yes.
Nobody wants to waste their money
Yes.
on something that sucks. So that's what I'm saying. It would only help if it was good.
No, can't argue with that. It definitely helps if it's good. I want to go back in time a little bit because this is almost, well, I think what we're trying to get is history to repeat itself, but the MP3 iPod era. Now, I know plenty of y'all, very young, born in 2000 something, you only know having your music on your phone. There was a time where it was not like that. You had your phone in one pocket and your music in the other.
Yeah.
There was a time before that where your music couldn't fit in your pocket. And I remember me walking to school with my Walkman, and before that, my tape player. And this is how crazy it sounded, was I liked winter because I could put my Walkman in in my winter coat pocket. But once I just had pants, it was too big.
Yeah.
And when that switch happened from Walkmans and cassettes to MP3s, not everyone came along. Not everyone came along. There was a bit of, if you're a music head or you're technologically advanced, or the younger crowd, but it definitely left some people behind where it's like, okay, this MP3 stuff is too much for me to handle.
Yeah.
I think this is going to be a version of that, because before streaming, it was downloads, like actually downloading an album.
Yeah, and then you have to mess with the metadata to get it to show properly.
And even at that time, I had people who were like, Adriel, I know you know how to do that, so just send me the songs once you do that, And it was still some kind of, space between of like, all right, I'm not there yet. I think this will be that. So how many people do we think are equipped for something like this to be able to download an album and listen to it outside of Spotify? Because that's like, or outside of Apple, that's something people are not accustomed to right now.
Yeah.
Like listening to music outside of Spotify, they're like, what does that even look like?
Yeah,
so
that's true.
I think this is a whole learning curve that probably can't be learned with one album. But I think if this can be seen as something that's not as hard as it seems, that sort of thing. I think when you think about it, again, we're all using Spotify, so it's like music. Now I have like a iTunes app as well where I have some downloaded songs, but it's mostly Spotify. And it's like, how many people know how to use the iTunes app? Because I'll spill the beans. Here's what you do: download the album. Once you got your zip folder, unzip it.
Yep.
Double click, open that zip up. Then take all your music files, your MP3 files, your WAV files, drag them into iTunes. Now, all y'all who have Macs, iTunes is already on your computer, but you can get iTunes on a PC as well. So drag it into your iTunes, plug in your phone, and just go from iTunes to your phone. Now, for y'all who use Spotify, iTunes is on your phone as well, so you can use it. But what I just described might be too much for some people.
It's a multi-step process. That's the thing. It's a multi-step process.
Exactly.
And also, we currently in 2024, the people that are like young now, like if you're like a 16-year-old, 17-year-old, 18-year-old, you don't even mess with like the directory of your computer.
No,
you don't go into like that. Like when you open like the folders, that bar at the top that says like C:\\. The fact that you get that's like something that, but that's just like a legit thing. That's like not even a music thing. That's like a competency thing with computers. Like it's kind of like millennials and like Gen X, where like, and I guess like very, very early Gen Z people.
Yeah, debatable.
Who are like, they know, like, if you were like to port forward something, do you think somebody that's Gen Z right now even knows the thing that I'm talking about? Or somebody that's older than Gen X knows what I'm talking about? No.
And I think it's a good point you're bringing up of like, as technology changed, and this is for music, but just technology in general, it left a certain group behind.
Yeah.
And I think like, in this particular group, it's like we're assuming that, I don't think we are assuming, but the Gen Zs don't know how to do this. So it's like the Gen Zs who would be leaving the generation after them behind are kind of left behind us, because I think it's our generation that when we download this album, we're like, hey, we know what to do with it.
Yeah.
But I think the Gen Zs,
yeah, I guess you just play it on you just double click and play it on your computer. Like, how do you even get it on your phone?
So that is my biggest question about this. Is I think that it's going to be such a learning curve. And I feel like a learning curve in music was almost normal in the past. Even in the tape era, it's like you had to have learning curve of putting your own tape together. Yeah, you played a tape and that was cool, but then making your own tape, that was normal. Everyone made their own tape. So you had to learn how to make your own tape. What's learning there in music consumption now? There's no learning at all. Music consumption is like, if you want to learn, we got you covered.
Yeah.
You know,
download the app and then type in the name of the artist and then just press play.
You know, so I think that even that mindset is like someone's going to be way more deterred than they would in the past.
I agree.
Because in the past, that learning is part of the experience. You know, there's no way. So I'm very, very, very interested. Here's what I'll say.
Yeah.
I think it's going to, the other thing will be the price of an album, because we're so used to, again, this subscription model where we pay $12, $15 a month and we have everything. So he doesn't really say in his DMs, but what price point you think would work for an album? He already has a barrier of the downloading and all that, but what price point do you think works?
I think if I were him, I would do like $10. It's got to be less than, because if you're only doing it digitally, it has to be less than a physical. Because I would just get the physical. Like right now, first of all, right now, like a vinyl record costs like $30 to $40, which is insane.
Yep.
But then your CD is probably gonna cost like around half. I haven't bought a CD in forever, so I don't even know how much a CD costs.
Like $12, $15.
Yeah. So it's got to be like around $10. Whether or not Kanye West thinks it's worth it to sell his music for $10, and whether it's gonna be a different conversation. And honestly, I just like that because music consumption became so simplified, so easy. I think there's gonna be it's gonna be hard. I think it's gonna be hard to actually generate digital download sales, or even like digital download sales. It's gonna be so much harder to do, just because for the vast majority of people, they're just like open Spotify or Apple Music or Tidal. Yeah. Search.
And that's it.
Name of artist, hit the song, and it's playing. Right?
Yeah.
Now you're telling people, okay, download it. Okay, now download it, put it into the music folder that you have on your laptop. Then add it to iTunes, right? Then plug in your phone. And then you gotta go to your phone tab, like the phone tab in iTunes, and then you have to scroll down to the artist, or you could just sync all music. Right?
Yep, sync all music.
You sync all music, but then if you sync all music and you had a bunch of, you actually have a ton of songs in iTunes, then you're filling up all of like the data on your. See what I'm talking about? You see what I'm talking about?
Look how far deep in we went. Like,
do you see how many steps I'm talking about? So when you're on Spotify, it's all streaming. None of it's stored on your phone.
Yeah.
So it takes up zero space. So. It's going to be difficult. Do I want him to succeed, even though Kanye West is Kanye West currently? I want it to succeed just for the precedent.
One more thing before we wrap this up. I think he should go the Tyler Taylor route. And
just re-record everything?
Not re-record, but be very vinyl heavy.
Okay.
Where those guys, they're breaking vinyl selling records, where it's like, okay, I sell the vinyl comes with a download.
Yeah.
Something like that. I think actually selling an actual physical probably is his best bet. But listen, I'm not gonna tell Kanye what to do. He is, a plethora of experience in this field. But listen, here's the thing. I want us to actually hear Vultures too, or it to be heard in a way where we might have to review it. Like it's heard by enough people that it's like, okay, people are really doing this.
Yeah.
That's what I want. That's what I want to see.
Yeah, but the thing with that is it happened with Donda too, but it sucked. And then nobody talked about it. So it's got to be good enough. That's what I'm saying. It all actually really comes down to, is it going to be good enough? Because if it's good and it's only in
everyone will hear it.
Yeah, if it's really good and it's only in a physical or the digital download sense, you're going to pay the money for it. You're going to pay the money for it because it's good enough that everybody's talking about it. So it's got to be good.
Yeah, I agree.
It's got to be good. Now it has to be good. 2002, your name was on it and you were Nelly. People are just buying that shit because they want to hear the new Nelly music, right? But now there's a barrier to entry, right?
Yeah.
There's a barrier to entry to that. So, all right. Thank you, everybody, for listening to Soundbites. This one was more of a music business conversation, right? Thank you for listening to Soundbites. We're talking about the music, the culture, and the internet, and I guess the money that creates the music culture that
All the money.
Yeah, that we have today. Make sure you follow, you know, us on socials at Album Mode Pod on Instagram, on Twitter, on TikTok, everywhere at Album Mode Pod. Obviously on YouTube, we're just at Album Mode. We got that.
Yeah.
We got that Album Mode, and it's only us. Make sure you're leaving a comment. Okay? Comment, like, subscribe. Send it to people. The thing is with the Album Mode Podcast, anybody that comes in contact with the Album Mode Podcast loves it. Right? So we're basically trying to get more people in contact with it so there's more love.
It's a safe share.
Yeah, it is.
It's a safe share.
It is. And I think that I love the comments. Everybody in the comments. I am in the comments watching. I am commenting.
Comment creeping.
I am not commenting. Sometimes, usually, I would say sometimes. Sometimes, I am not commenting under the Album Mode account. I have my own personal account that I talk to people with, and it's fun to it's just fun to interact with the people that are in the comments. Our community is growing, and it's a fun one.
And tell Demar he has great hands.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to the Soundbites portion of Album Mode. And Adriel, make sure you know yourself and know your worth.
Later days.